Part 20. I took away the villain's son. Author, the great Onmyoji. Chapter 193. Please ask the emperor for advice. When Yang Hao saw the relic of the eternal emperor saying this, he felt a little relieved. If you don't have the ultimate defense supreme emperor soldier, you will naturally have the holy land of eternal life. The soul of the eternal emperor glanced sideways at Yang Hao and said casually, "Little guy, you should have been recognized by the emperor's soldiers, and you are the destined holy master of this generation, right?" "That's right." When Yang Hao heard the Yongsheng emperor mentioning the Ji-Dao emperor weapons in the Holy Land, his heart moved. There are 5 Ji-Dao emperor weapons in the Yongsheng Holy Land, and he naturally knew about it. "But I heard that even if I am the Holy Lord of Tianding, I need to become a real Holy Lord before I can borrow a Ji-Dao imperial weapon," he said to the soul of the eternal emperor. This is what Zhongwu said to him at the beginning, so he naturally believed it. Yes and no, the eternal emperor smiled. The destined Holy Lord has many privileges. After becoming a Holy Lord, you can indeed use a Ji-Da imperial weapon for body protection at any time, but if you are recognized by the Ji-Da imperial weapon, you will still have the opportunity to borrow it even if you have not become a Holy Lord. However, there is a time limit for borrowing. Hearing this, Yang Hao was moved and said, "How can I borrow it? How long can I borrow it?" The Yongsheng emperor pointed out a way for him. He really had never thought about being able to borrow the Ji-Dao emperor's weapons before becoming the Holy Lord. Don't say that he didn't know about this matter, and maybe even Zhongwu and many other senior officials of the Yongsheng Holy Land didn't know about it. How long to borrow is also a matter of concern to him. If he enters the Sea of Underworld, he does not know how long he will stay in it. Once the time exceeds the borrowing time of the Ji-Dao imperial soldier, the Ji-Dao imperial soldier will leave on his own. That's definitely not possible. In fact, if you are recognized by the Ji-Da emperor weapon, you are qualified to use the Ji-Da emperor weapon. In addition, you control a great avenue, and you can barely exert the power of an extremely powerful imperial weapon. It's just that the Holy Land, as the foundation of the Ji-Dao emperor's soldiers, has been supported by the Holy Land's luck all year round. We issued a big ban back then. If there is insufficient luck, it will be impossible to take out the Ji-Dao emperor's soldiers from the Holy Land of eternal life. Normally, after you become a Holy Lord and receive destiny, you can naturally use one. Now that you have not become a saint, nor have you inherited the position of Holy Lord, you are certainly not qualified enough. But in terms of its nature, as long as you can get a lot of Holy Land blessings, you can still achieve the same effect. The Eternal Emperor said slowly and leisurely. A large number of Holy Land blessings. Yang Hao's eyes moved slightly. When it comes to luck, it is mysterious, but it is real. For example, he now has the luck blessing of Ziwei Star and the Times. Naturally, the luck blessing of the Holy Land of Eternal Life also exists, and it is superior to, it is above the vast majority of the extremely powerful people in the Holy Land of Eternal Life. However, as the soul of the Eternal Emperor said, it has not yet reached the level where it is possible to take the Emperor of the Extreme Path from the Holy Land. Since you are the Holy Lord of Destiny, you have never experienced the 9 tribulations of heaven and man, right? Suddenly, the Eternal Emperor said quietly. 9 calamities of heaven and man? Indeed, I have never been there. Great Emperor, through the 9 tribulations of heaven and man, can I get a lot of Holy Land blessings? Yang Hao suddenly understood the path pointed out by the Yongsheng Emperor. He had naturally heard of the 9 tribulations of heaven and man. That was the method used by the Yongsheng Holy Land to assess how to become a Holy Lord. If he could pass the 9 tribulations of heaven and man, he would be qualified to become one. The preparatory Holy Lord of the Eternal Holy Land. Of course, because he became the destined Holy Lord, he naturally did not need to pass such a test again, so he never thought about it. Now, the soul of the eternal emperor has reset the 9 tribulations of heaven and man. In front of his eyes. Yes. The 9 tribulations of heaven and man were left behind by the 5 great emperors of the Holy Land of eternal life. Every time a calamity is passed, the luck of eternal life will be blessed by 1 point. If you completely pass through the 9 tribulations of heaven and man, you will be blessed by a large amount of luck accumulated forever. Normally, even if they pass through the 9 tribulations, they cannot break through the shackles, and the Judeo Emperor's soldiers can lead them out of the Holy Land of eternal life. But if it is one with the destiny of your divine Lord, it can be done. How long you can use it depends on how many tribulations you can pass. The soul of the eternal emperor said to Yang Hao with a smile. Yang Hao understood. The so-called time limit means that the more prosperous his luck is, the more he can ignore the rules of the eternal Holy Land. If I pass all the 9 calamities of heaven and man, how many years will it be available to me? Yang Hao suddenly asked. The blessing of the Holy Land's luck is already very strong in you. Except for the great desolate sword, everyone should be able to use it for hundreds of years. However, the 9 tribulations of heaven and man as a holy Lord are not as easy to pass as you think. After passing the 9th calamity, I received the most terrifying luck blessing. But, corresponding. Even if you pass the 8 tribulations, the luck blessing you get will be greatly reduced, and you can only use it for 30 years at most. The eternal emperor's eyes penetrated Yang Hao, and after looking at it, he said, "Thank you, Emperor." Yang Hao squinted his eyes and understood. 100 years is enough for him. He has not practiced for 100 years yet. When 100 years pass, he will have become a saint and become the Holy Lord of the eternal Holy Land, and there is no difference in using it permanently. Of course, the prerequisite is to pass the 9 tribulations of heaven and man. As far as he knows, time in the eternal restricted area is very chaotic. There is still a big difference between 30 years and 100 years, so some insurance must be passed. The 9 tribulations of heaven and man are: De Wang's sword, that piece of grass. Yang Hao muttered in his heart. He once saw with his own eyes the 5 supreme emperor weapons, the mother sword of all things, the emperor mountain, a divine gate, a hatchet, and a piece of grass in the eternal Holy Land. The remains of the eternal emperor are all having said that, there must be some ultimate defensive imperial weapons among them. Judging from the shape, it is obvious that it is either the imperial mountain or the divine gate. Through the system income records, Yang Hao knew the names of the 5 ultimate defensive imperial weapons very clearly. Needless to say, the mother sword of all things and the emperor mountain are the Jingshen, the hatchet is the sea of bitterness, and the grass is the great desolation. Although he possesses the ultimate emperor armament, he doesn't know much about the ultimate emperor armament Yang Hao. However, he has already heard that among the 5 Judeo imperial weapons, that piece of grass must be more unique than the other 4 Judeo imperial weapons. The 9 calamities of heaven and man should not be underestimated. There are endless changes, and everyone faces different disasters when entering. Therefore, I don't have any advice for you. The only thing I can remind you is that the 9 tribulations of heaven and man were created by the 5 emperors of our Holy Land with reference to the 5 decays of heaven and man. Maybe you don't know what the 5 declines of heaven and man are, but I will also tell you. Do you know why the holy level is rampant and the quasi-emperor cannot come out? At this time, the voice of the eternal emperor slowly came again. 9 calamities of heaven and man and 5 declines of heaven and man? The reason why the quasi-emperor did not come out. When Yang Hao heard this, he looked at the eternal emperor with speechless eyes and said, "Didn't you say it before?" It must be because of the 5 declines of heaven and man. This was the first time he had heard of the 5 declines of heaven and man. He. The soul of the eternal emperor was stunned when he heard this, but said dumbly, "That's right, I'll tell you. Sages are the pinnacle that practitioners can reach. But it's not impossible to break through. When you reach perfection and attain enlightenment, the sages will undergo transformation. Transformation is long and painful. Once you enter the realm of quasi-emperors, the 5 declines of heaven and humanity will always be with you. Most quasi-emperors have no time to spare and are busy fighting against the 5 declines of heaven and humans, so naturally they cannot be born. The words of the Yongsheng emperor made Yang Hao's face change slightly. No wonder he has never seen the quasi-emperor come out. It turned out to be because of the 5 declines of heaven and man. Even a powerful quasi-emperor cannot walk out. Needless to say, he knows how terrible the 5 declines of heaven and man are. The 5 declines of heaven and man are body decline, spirit decline, formation decline, dharma decline, and Tao decline. The 9 tribulations of heaven and man are born out of the 5 declines of heaven and man. You can think of them as a weakened version of the 5 declines of heaven and man. No matter how the 9 kalpas of heaven and man change, they remain unchanged and evolve based on the 5 declines of heaven and man. Therefore, if you really want to search for the sea of underworld, don't be careless and be prepared before going through the 9 tribulations of heaven and man, the Eternal Emperor said earnestly. Thank you very much for your advice. When Yang Hao heard this, he immediately thanked him again seriously. He had indeed underestimated the 9 tribulations of heaven and man before, thinking that it would not be too difficult. I am afraid that it was precisely because of this that the Eternal Emperor saw this, so he specifically pointed out the 9 tribulations of heaven and man. The origin of tribulation. Physical decline, spiritual decline, formation decline, dharma decline, and Tao decline. I didn't expect that becoming a quasi-emperor would face such difficulties. Yang Hao secretly thought, he is still far away from becoming a saint, let alone a quasi-emperor. This is the first time he knows that a quasi-emperor will face such a dilemma. Okay. The Holy Land of Eternal Life sets up the test of the 9 tribulations of heaven and humanity, probably in the hope that those who pass through the 9 tribulations of heaven and humanity can experience the 5 declines of heaven and humanity in advance and prepare for future enlightenment. It is well intentioned. After getting the answer he wanted at the Emperor's mausoleum, Yang Hao said goodbye to the soul of the Eternal Emperor and left. At this moment, as soon as he walked out of the Emperor's mausoleum, he saw Zhongwu's figure standing quietly outside the Emperor's tomb. How about it? Did you get the answer you wanted? Seeing Yang Hao walking out, Zhongwu said with a chuckle. He is worthy of being a great emperor. He is knowledgeable about the present and has broad knowledge. Yang Hao remembered that the soul of the Eternal Emperor casually told him the solution, and he felt a little happier. Auntie, take me somewhere. Good. Where do you want to go? I want to break through the 9 tribulations of heaven and man. Please download the novel without underlining. I took away the villain's son. Author, the great Onmyoji. Chapter 194. Emperor Zun actually wants to break through the 9 tribulations of heaven and man. Really? Isn't Emperor Zun the Holy Lord of Heaven? Why go through the 9 tribulations of heaven and man? I don't know, maybe Emperor Zun wants to sharpen his mind. Emperor Zun has an extremely strong character. Lord Longshan has survived the 9 tribulations of heaven and man. As the Holy Lord of Destiny, it is understandable that he wants to compete with others. This is indeed the case, but the Emperor's strength is lower, and the 9 tribulations of heaven and man still have requirements for the realm. Have you forgotten Emperor Zun's combat power? There were voices of discussion. The 9 tribulations of heaven and man are very important as a test for the Holy Lord of the Eternal Holy Land. Yang Hao's plan to break through the 9 tribulations of heaven and humanity immediately alerted the senior officials of the Holy Land of Eternal Life. Not only the senior officials of the Holy Land of Eternal Life, but many disciples and elders of the Holy Land of Eternal Life also got the news and headed towards the land of 9 tribulations of heaven and man, creating an unprecedented grand occasion. At this time, Yang Hao looked at the familiar divine gate in front of him, his eyelids twitched slightly, and he was speechless. Is this the entrance to the 9 tribulations of heaven and man? Are all the secret places in the Holy Land of Eternal Life a piece of Judeo-imperial weapon? When he caused the emperor's soldiers to be shocked before, he had such a conjecture. He did not expect that the entrance to the 9 tribulations of heaven and man was actually the Judeo emperor's Jingshen sect, which made Yang Hao deeply lament the bad taste of these emperors. It's just a coincidence that you met. Go in. If you can't get through it, just think silently in your heart and give up. It's just that the 9 tribulations of heaven and humanity are not a place for leisure. Once you give up and want to enter again, it will take 100 years. Zhang Wu said to Yang Hao seriously. Yang Hao had already told Zhang Wu the information that the soul of the eternal emperor had told him before. After Zhang Wu analyzed it for him, she supported Yang Hao's choice. But Zhang Wu was also not at ease. God, it's very difficult to survive the 9 human tribulations. Even back then, she had a narrow escape from the 9 tribulations of heaven and earth, and almost died in it. It's a pity that the 9 tribulations of heaven and man are ever changing, and my experience cannot be of any use to how er. Zhang Wu looked at Yang Hao walking into it without hesitation and shook her head regretfully. Girl Zhang, how many calamities do you think this little guy can survive? At this moment, a figure appeared next to Zhang Wu. It was Qin Sheng. In my opinion, up to the 7th calamity. Perhaps in the 6th calamity, although this little guy's strength and talent are at the pinnacle of this era, after all, his training time is too short and his character is not tested enough, so he cannot be as outstanding as Lord Longshan at this time. Gu Longsheng also appeared next to Qin Sheng. I believe in him. When Zhang Wu heard this, she was actually a little worried in her heart. What Gu Longsheng said was very reasonable. The 9 tribulations of heaven and man naturally have tests on cultivation and talent, but the most important thing is the test of character. Yang Hao's character is not bad, but the shortcomings of Yang Hao are obvious, and the training time is too short. 100 years, for a powerful practitioner, is just a passing moment. In the eyes of many powerful people in the Holy Land of Eternal Life, it is only a matter of time that Yang Hao passes through the 9 tribulations of heaven and man. But now, it is too difficult. Even so, Zhang Wu still believes that Yang Hao will create miracles again. Yang Hao naturally didn't care about the disturbances from the outside world. At this time, he stepped directly into the Jingshen gate and was transported to the secret land through space fluctuations. Somewhat, this is not an ordinary secret realm. It is more like a world formed by overlapping divine formations. After teleporting in from Jingshen gate, Yang Hao sensed a somewhat familiar aura. This feeling was very similar to the core of the true world in Shiwen Mountain. Master, be careful. This is indeed composed of various divine formations, but it is not the sea of divine formations in the real world. Here, it is more of an illusory divine formation. Moreover, the illusion god formation here has countless evolutions, and even with my knowledge, it would take tens of thousands of years to crack it. Yunyan's warning voice came. Illusion god formation. Yang Hao murmured to himself. The phantom god array is a variant of the god array. It mainly uses illusions and affects the people in the god array. However, he has no intention of cracking it. This is the 9 tribulations of heaven and man, and all the handwriting the great emperor laid it out, and it was strange that Yunyan was able to decipher it in a short time even though he was not yet a great emperor. Just as Yang Hao was looking at the world, illusions appeared one after another in the next moment. In the blink of an eye, a fat figure appeared opposite Yang Hao. From all directions, the sky has become bright and windy, and the sky is vast. Little guy, as long as you kill me, it will be considered a success. The fat figure looked at Yang Hao and said with a smile. Behead. Yang Hao looked at the figure of the fat man opposite and found that the other person was blooming with a terrifying aura. He was at the peak of the giant realm. He didn't need to think too much to know that it was transformed with his realm. If that's all it is, it's not that difficult. Yang Hao looked at the fat man opposite him. He was invincible in the world. Even the emperor had to bow before him. Wrong. The next moment, Yang Hao's expression changed slightly. My divine body. At the moment when he was about to take action, he felt that his divine body seemed to transform into the most ordinary flesh and blood. His breath is weakening crazily. Incarnated into a mortal body. Yang Hao murmured to himself, feeling a little troublesome. Fortunately, it's just the disappearance of the divine body. Although it's a bit unaccustomed, it's not a big problem to suppress people in the same realm. Master, the illusory formation here is very strange, it has made your divine body void. With your current body, I cannot merge with you. At this moment, another piece of bad news came. With the disappearance of the divine body, Yunyan could not merge with him. You must know that once Yunyan merges with him, he will at least be able to increase his strength by a large level. No problem. Is this, the 5 decline of heaven and man? It must be that he is in decline. Yang Hao did not panic. He remembered the previous reminder from the soul of the eternal emperor. The 9 tribulations of heaven and man are endlessly changing and there is no normal state, but they are all inseparable from their origin. They are all evolved from the 5 declines of heaven and man. Haha, is this little guy really in decline? It's just the beginning. It's best to defeat me as soon as possible, otherwise you will understand what true physical decline is. But at this moment, the fat man opposite said with a smile again, and said in a joking tone. He seemed to be able to hear Yang Hao's thoughts and directly said what was on his mind. And from the moment he appeared to the present, the fat man was not busy. After fighting Yang Hao, I was even happy to see Yang Hao stay here. Then let's fight. Yang Hao frowned, but he had already sensed the meaning of Fatty's words. Not only did his divine body begin to disappear, but even his energy, blood, and Dao patterns began to gradually drain and wither. This feeling made Yang Hao very uncomfortable. Therefore, he took action directly and decisively, and the sea of supernatural powers surged out. Like thunder on the ground, he killed the fat man on the opposite side. So strong. Yang Hao narrowed his eyes. He used the ancient killing formation and the divine power sea at the same time. Even if his divine body disappeared, he still exploded with terrifying lethality. But he didn't expect that the fat man's figure opposite him, who was in the same realm as him, was not directly attacked by him. Flash sale. Then come again. Yang Hao felt that his physical body was still decaying, and this had an impact on him in all aspects. The physical body is one of the most basic foundations. Once the divine body disappears, every killing move he makes will be greatly reduced. So he must fight quickly. But the opponent is not weak at all. It can even be said to be the strongest existence in the giant realm. Fall. Yang Hao simply summoned the 5 elements Dao directly, annihilating the opponent's figure in an instant like destroying dry matter. Kindness. It consumes a lot. Although the opponent's figure was annihilated and the scene changed, it meant that Yang Hao had passed the first calamity. But Yang Hao frowned. When he just used the 5 elements avenue to annihilate the opponent, he could sense that because there was no support from the divine body, under the circumstances, he had the illusion of being drained in an instant. It was really awkward without the support of his divine body. What will be the second calamity? My physical body is still the same, and my divine body has not returned. Trouble. Yang Hao watched the scene in front of him change, but his body did not change at all, and his frown deepened. Only in the second calamity, he had already realized the horror of the 9 calamities of heaven and man. You. Don't be lazy, dig it for me. If you can't dig out 100 divine sources, don't even think about leaving here alive. At this moment, a fierce scolding came from Yang Hao's ears. Yang Hao raised his eyebrows and found that he was suddenly wearing dirty grey linen clothes and holding a pickaxe in his hand. Ping pong. Pong. When. All around him, there was a bustle of people, men, women, and children dressed similarly to him, all mechanically holding manuscripts and waving them at the ancient mine not far away. And the person scolding him looked extremely familiar. Dressed in exquisite leather clothes, with a sinister face and a fierce look, he was the fat man who was killed by him just now. You! What are you doing? Hurry up and dig it for me. At this moment, Yang Hao heard the fat man's cold and angry voice. A whip shadow flew across. Yang Hao's eyes turned cold. In an instant, the whip shadow flew across the sky, and the fat man was instantly wiped out. But the next moment, the scene changed again. You! Don't be lazy, dig it for me. Can't dig out. Everything returned to its original state, and the fat man who had been instantly killed by him appeared in the distance and mechanically cursed again. At the same time, Yang Hao felt that his physical body was depleting faster than before. Interesting. In this second calamity, are you asking me to dig up the divine source? If this guard is killed, the rate of physical decay will accelerate again. In just an instant, Yang Hao understood what he was going to do in this second calamity. However, when the guard's whip shadow came towards him again, Yang Hao's face was expressionless, but he did not hesitate to move a thought. Kill this fat man again. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I took away the villain's son. Author, the great Onmyoji. Chapter 195. Fatty fell. The body is failing again. Yang Hao could even feel that his originally extremely hard bones were beginning to loosen. The scene flickers and changes again. You! Don't be lazy, dig it for me. The fat guard's angry shouts came again. Without thinking, Yang Hao killed the fat guard for the third time. His physical body was failing again, and even his crystal clear skin began to become flabby. Master, this calamity should force you to dig up the source of the gods and sharpen your character, rather than asking you to kill this guard. At this time, Yunyan's anxious voice came. She knew that Yang Hao was very proud, but she was worried that if he continued like this, Yang Hao would fail in only the second calamity. No problem. Yang Hao looked at the reappearance of the scene, and the fat man who once again yelled at him fiercely, with a cold light flashing in his eyes. In an instant, the fat man fell again. This, after repeated more than 10 times. Yang Hao's body had completely decayed. His face also became old and he was about to die. But Yang Hao was still persistent and never picked up the pickaxe in his hand. As long as the fat guard dared to scold him, he would kill him. Finally, after another beheading, the scene before him finally changed. The surrounding mining scenes completely disappeared, and only Yang Hao's decayed and almost dry body stood like a statue. Yang Hao's cloudy eyes reflected reflections in all directions. The sky was clear and the wind was clear, as if he had returned to the scene in the first calamity. Boy, you have the guts. But at this moment, the fat man's figure reappeared, stretched out a thumb to Yang Hao, and then disappeared. Immediately afterwards, Yang Hao's withered and decaying body began to regain its vitality like a dead tree with spring. After a while, Yang Hao's the fleshly body was once again washed away by the precious light, and the skin was as crystal clear as jade. The breath of his fleshly body changed in the next moment, exuding an endless vast and deep breath. Yang Hao's reincarnation Taoist divine body returned. The second calamity has passed. Master, what's going on? Yunyan looked at the scene and naturally realized that Yang Hao was not eliminated, but passed the second calamity. This made Yunyan feel incredible. Originally, she was worried that Yang Hao would be killed due to aging after constantly killing the fat guards, sending the second calamity. But she never thought that the master could survive this calamity, which made her feel confused. He said it himself. Let me kill him. Although it was the first calamity, the second calamity was still him. Then just kill him. Yang Hao said lightly. This. Did the master already know this in advance? Yunyan asked in surprise. Unexpectedly, Yang Hao shook his head and said, no. I only figured it out after I passed it. Yunyan. Master, why are you so determined to kill this fat man? This calamity is not difficult at all. It only requires digging out 100 divine sources. Master, you can control magical powers such as great spiritual energy and atmospheric luck. Although the divine sources are very precious, it does not take much time to dig them out. Hearing Yunyan's words, Yang Hao chuckled and said, that's true. But why should I dig? Just because I am passing the test, I have to endure the scolding? Be humble and let others order you around. So what's the point of my practice? Just depriving me of my physical strength is not enough. If I have the energy to spare, I will kill. Kill me until you can't kill me, and don't try to humiliate me. Yang Hao has an upright figure and a casual tone, but he has an aura of incomparable confidence. He has been invincible all the way since his cultivation. How has he ever groveled? Faced with all calculations and desperate situations, he has thought about surrendering. Faced with such a test, naturally he also know. I see. Yunyan was silent for a moment, impressed by Yang's arrogance. She finally understood the reason why Yang Hao did what he did before, and fell into a long silence. Has this third calamity sealed my sea of spiritual energy? While Yang Hao was communicating with Yunyan, the third calamity had arrived. At this moment, the disappearance of the divine body was even more serious than before. Yang Hao sensed that his sea of spiritual energy was sealed, and his spiritual power could not be used. A practitioner, it is self-evident what it means to be unable to use spiritual power. If you defeat me, you will pass. At this time, an honest bearded man appeared in the distance from Yang Hao. He smiled very loyally. The aura on his body was still that of a giant. Obviously, Yang Hao's physical body returned in this scene, but the sea of spiritual energy was completely sealed. The opponent's strength has not changed at all. He is still at the peak of the giant realm. You lose. Yang Hao said without hesitation when he saw this scene. Then, the bearded man was startled. Immediately, he felt a terrible aura annihilating down. 5 Elements Avenue. Yang Hao repeated his old tricks, like the first. Just like during the calamity, the 5 elements Dao can be directly summoned. Although spiritual power cannot be used, the power of the Dao can be drawn out. With the power of the Dao, a mere God-King realm, no matter how powerful it is, can only be annihilated in an instant. Things happened. The third calamity was passed easily. The scene changed again. When? This time, Yang Hao's ears heard the sound of knocking again, but compared with the messy knocking sound in the second calamity, the sound coming from his ears seemed very rhythmic, crisp and sweet. My friend, please refine a law into a weapon and you can survive this calamity. At this time, a gentle voice came. Yang Hao raised his eyebrows and saw the scene clearly. This was a blacksmith's shop, and the person who made the sound was the bearded man who had just been defeated by him. He was holding a handful in his hand at the moment. The extremely delicate hammer is striking the red object in front of me. I don't know what material it is made of. Don't be impulsive. Don't kill me either. I'm not that idiot just now. You can't pass the test by killing me. Just when Yang Hao was about to step forward and take a closer look, the bearded man who was banging the hammer said helplessly to Yang Hao. Yang Hao also blinked when he heard this. He had been killing the fat man before because the fat man humiliated him, so he naturally killed him. This bearded man seemed to know what happened, and even deliberately reminded him. Good. The bearded man with beards was quite kind to Yang Hao, and he was not unreasonable, so he immediately agreed. He walked closer and took a closer look at the bearded man beating him, but his eyes shrank sharply. He finally saw clearly what the bearded man was beating. Those are one law after another. The other party beat the law with an ordinary hammer, and every blow was like a miraculous craftsmanship. Master, not only does this person have an extremely profound understanding of the law, but his weapon refining methods are definitely better than those of a superior. Without using spiritual power, he actually grabbed the laws from the void and beat them into weapons. It was terrifying. Yunyin's voice came, making Yang Hao more aware of the extraordinariness of the bearded man in front of him who looked like a blacksmith. That's it? You can figure it out on your own. Everything here is available to you. At this time, the voice of the bearded man came again. He suddenly stopped tapping and grabbed the red-hot law with his bare hands. In front of Yang Hao's eyes, a small knife appeared in an instant. A knife like the one on Huangquan Road, a small knife whose entire body was made of laws. The bearded man casually threw the small knife on a small table in front of Yang Hao, and then disappeared without a trace. Forge the law into a tool. This is the method of the supreme weapon refiner. Under the premise that spiritual power cannot be used. Yang Hao squinted his eyes and carefully looked at the knife transformed from the law in his hand. Like the formation master, the weapon refiner is also divided into 9 levels, and those above the 9th level are the supreme and supreme. Difficult to handle. Even if you have spiritual power, if you want to turn the law into a weapon, you still need the attainments of an unparalleled weapon refiner. Without spiritual power, this is simply an impossible task. Yunyin's voice came again. She was constantly trying to help Yang Hao find a way. He. Yang Hao threw away the law knife in his hand and said casually, Yunyin. The 9 tribulations between heaven and man are not to choose the weapon refiner, but to choose the holy master. Why did he leave this behind? He grinned, and actually threw the law knife directly on the blacksmithing table just now. When? Yang Hao picked up the hammer without hesitation and began to smash the law knife. Although he could not use spiritual power, Yang Hao's attainments in the law could be considered a beginner. The law knife in front of him was not complicated. Is formed by the fusion of the law of gold and the law of fire. As it happens, Yang Hao is very familiar with the law of the 5 elements. He used his familiarity with the laws of gold and fire without thinking, and without spending too much time, he used this law knife, used the power of the divine body to hammer it into a small sword of law. I see. Yunyin's surprised tone came. She understood. Sure enough, after Yang Hao tempered the knife into a small sword, the scene changed instantly. The 4th calamity was broken. Beat me. Just as the scene changed and the scorching breath of the law sword in Yang Hao's hand had not dissipated, an extremely cold voice came. The words fell to the ground. The ancient killing array in Yang Hao's body collapsed directly. At the same time, the vast killing array emerged. Come. He. Yang Hao still chuckled. The 5 elements avenue appeared again. Immediately, the 5th calamity was broken. Please download the novel without underlining. I took away the villain's son. Author, the great Onmyoji. Chapter 196. The 9 tribulations of heaven and man. Even though the 5 great emperors of the eternal Holy Land have continuously improved them and created them based on the 5 decays of heaven and man, they still have to pay attention to the basic laws. The absolute rule here is that only those below the saint level can step in and accept the test. Naturally, as long as the test of the 9 tribulations of heaven and man involves combat, it is impossible to take into account the existence of the great Dao. Logically speaking, this is a very reasonable setting. But even the great emperor would never have thought that there would be a perverted monster like Yang Hao who controlled the great Dao before he became a saint. No matter whether it is depriving the divine body, sealing the sea of spiritual energy, or closing the killing array, it will not affect Yang Hao's ability to summon the 5 elements avenue. Once the great road comes out, who can be Yang Hao's opponent in the same realm? Not to mention being in the same realm, even if the opponent is an eternal giant or emperor, as long as it is a battle test, there will be no suspense. Even before Yang Hao had time to see his opponent clearly, he had already decisively suppressed his opponent in the fifth calamity. As expected, the scene began to change again. In an instant, he had arrived at the sixth calamity. Female. Yang Hao raised his brows and looked at the place where he was. This place looked familiar to him. There were more than tens of thousands of sacred monuments erected in all directions, which reminded him of the forest of 10,000 Dharma stels in the Holy Land of Creation. But he was a little surprised. The strange thing is that on top of the tallest monument, a cold woman with a peerless face sits cross-legged. But upon closer inspection, Yang Hao found that the cold woman's eyes were closed. Blind. Yang Hao's heart moved, but he was a little uncertain. Practitioners, don't say that when you reach the realm of giants, even if you build a foundation and become a prince, your energy and blood will be full, and your spiritual sea will be endless. As long as you never fall, your physical body will be damaged by any serious damage. It can be restored through various elixirs, or techniques. The cold woman with closed eyes in front of him was obviously the one he killed without even seeing her in the previous calamity. Opponent. In the realm of a cold woman, it is naturally impossible to be blind. Unexpectedly, Emperor Samsara turned out to be a woman. Yang Hao looked at the woman and guessed. In fact, it was already the sixth calamity. No matter how stupid he was, he had already guessed it. The fat man and bearded man who appeared in the previous calamities, including the woman in front of him, were all very likely to be the former emperor of the Eternal Holy Land. According to Yang Hao's previous understanding of the emperor, the fat man should be Emperor Hunkin, and the bearded man should be Emperor Zhuantian. He was not sure about this woman at first. But he knew that there is an emperor in the Holy Land of Eternal Life whose eyes are always closed, like a blind man, and he is the emperor of Samsara. During this calamity, your killing formation has been shattered. You can search for formation patterns, formation eyes, and formation diagrams here on your own. Reassemble the killing formation, and if the power exceeds this one, it will be considered as passing. When Yang Hao was looking at the woman who was suspected of being the emperor of Samsara, she said calmly. Yang Hao looked over. The huge monument under the woman clearly contained a terrifying killing array. This killing array is very terrifying. Although it is not as good as the Master's killing array, it can still compete with the small world. It seems that this battle requires a lot of time to search and gather the killing array. First you need to find the array diagram. Master, try the Immortal King's creation picture. Yunyan reminded Yang Hao. The Immortal King's creation map seems to be ready for action. When Yang Hao heard this, he chuckled lightly. Then, he played out the Immortal King's creation diagram. The Immortal King's creation diagram that flew out began to continuously emit streams of divine light. Suddenly, these divine lights turned into extremely mysterious auras and moved towards going in all directions. There are countless killing formations here to condense materials. In an instant, a powerful killing formation began to slowly form under the evolution of the Immortal King's creation diagram. Although it is far less than Yang Hao's Hong, it is better than the woman's body. The killing array contained in the lower god monument must be significantly stronger. Good treasure. This calamity is over for you. The woman still closed her eyes, but she felt the aura of the huge killing array gathering, and she spoke before it was completed. In an instant, the scenes in all directions dissipated and changed again. The Immortal King's creation map also flew back into Yang Hao's body. The first 6 tribulations broken. You can fight this calamity with me. Sure enough, after the 6th calamity passed, he returned to the endless vast space, and an old man with white beard and hair appeared. 5 Elements Avenue. Yang Hao's eyes flashed. In this calamity, he returned from the ancient killing array, but he could clearly feel that all the law crystals in his body were gone. He could no longer use or comprehend any law. The body is declining, the spirit is declining, the array is declining, the Dharma is declining, and the Tao is declining. Yang Hao murmured to himself, watching the five elements avenue pouring out, directly engulfing the old man. As the scene changed, he did not guess about the upcoming eighth calamity, but was somewhat looking forward to the ninth. Combined with the eternal emperor, the saying of the remnant soul. These 9 calamities of heaven and man are based on the 5 declines of heaven and man. In the first 8 calamities, he has already understood the artistic conception. The first, third, fifth, and 7th calamities are respectively the first 4 declines of the 5 declines of heaven and man. The simulation of decline, spiritual decline, formation decline, and dharma decline. As for the other tribulations, it is about how to maintain the practice of the original mind in the situation of failure. When the body is declining, the heart cannot decline. When the spirit is declining, you need to adapt. When the formation is declining, you will have to adapt. Rebuild. If the law declines, so what? Yang Hao smiled as he watched the scene change in front of him, and finally stopped. Please give the emperor a sermon. Welcome the emperor. There was a noise and a bustle. Yang Hao found himself wearing the robe of an elder. Without any surprise, the old man who had been suppressed by him with the 5 elements avenue appeared above him. Today is the day when this emperor will preach for 1,000 years. Since you are giants, let's talk about the law. The old man was majestic but quite easygoing. He thought for a while and then began to preach. 1 in nature, 2 in the earth, the truth comes out. He preached slowly, and as the old man preached, golden lotuses appeared all over the ground, and there were many auspicious phenomena in the sky. Although Yang Hao is unable to sense the Dharma at this moment, he cannot. But he still listened with gusto. He has determined the identity of the old man. It should be the Tiandu emperor who created the immortal Dao pattern. From his understanding, this Tiandu emperor has a hobby of preaching and has an easygoing and friendly temperament. Naturally, the woman before was also the emperor of Samsara, as he had guessed before. A great emperor who was good at preaching, the content of his speech was naturally profound and fascinating. Gradually, Yang Hao found that the elders around him had an epiphany one after another, and the laws between heaven and earth were falling down. These elders all began to make breakthroughs under the teachings of Emperor Tiandu, and their knowledge of the law advanced by leaps and bounds. Only Yang Hao was like an isolated island in the deep sea. He seemed to be in the sea, but he was extremely lonely. He could only watch these elders break through, ecstatically. Yang Hao, however, looked at his nose with his eyes and his heart with his nose, without wavering in his will. Today, I will talk about the law of destruction. But then, the scene changed again. Emperor Tiandu began to preach again, and this time what he was talking about was the law of destruction possessed by Yang Hao. Just like before, as Emperor Tiandu continued to preach, the elders around him began to enlightenment, breakthrough. There was even a person who looked up to the sky and smiled. Under the sermon of Emperor Tiandu, he suddenly triggered the vision of heaven and earth, and performed the law of destruction to the ultimate, turning into the avenue of destruction. This scene made Yang Hao, who still couldn't understand, subconsciously, I felt a little envious. But how high is his understanding? Jealousy and envy. Yang Hao understood in an instant that this calamity was a test of his character. As expected, the scene changed again. This time Emperor Tiandu began to explain the law of reincarnation. Every time he preached, someone gained something, someone had an epiphany, someone was ecstatic. It is extremely real, but it makes people uneasy. Imagine that you are an extremely hungry traveler, and there are endless delicacies from mountains and seas, and clear water and sweet springs in front of you. But no matter how you run, you can't get close. Even if you know that it is a mirage, you still can't get close. Still scratching my heart with hundreds of claws, extremely irritated and painful. Did you talk about the law of destiny? Once again, Emperor Tiandu began to preach. This time, he was talking about the law of destiny, which was also the law that Yang Hao was most eager for. He still couldn't understand it, or even sense the law. Do you understand? After the sermon ended, but seeing that the picture had not disappeared, Emperor Tiandu suddenly looked at Yang Hao and asked. Clear. Yang Hao smiled. He suddenly stepped forward and said with a smile, what you preach is very interesting. Although I couldn't understand it, I remembered it all. I feel the sermon is very interesting, so let me share it. The Emperor of Tiandu was stunned when he heard the words. But he saw Yang Hao standing in front of him, his tongue blooming like a lotus flower, and he was gushing. He actually recited every sermon that Emperor Tiandu had preached these days, completely and accurately these days. Even though Yang Hao is unable to perceive the Dharma and countless people have become enlightened one after another, he still remains calm and calm. Not only that, he even explores the fun in it and records all the sermons of Emperor Tiandu. I memorized them all. As the voice of Yang Hao's sermon fell, the scene in front of me was slowly broken by the astonishment of Emperor Tiandu. The eighth calamity was broken. Master, what is going on? Seeing that the eighth calamity was over, Yunyan blinked in confusion and quickly asked Yang Hao _Fei. Lu reminds you, 3 things about reading dash. I took away the villain's son. Author, the great Onmyoji. Chapter 197. Ordinary mind. Believe in yourself, invincibility is enough. Yang Hao heard the words and said calmly. He watched others realize the Tao and continue to sublime it. It is still the Tao and the law that he wants to understand most. Is he jealous? Is he anxious? Naturally anxious, naturally jealous. The eighth calamity looks like a chance. But in fact it was an undercurrent. At first, his heart was very restless, even irritable. If Yang Hao could learn about Zhongwu's conversation with Qin Sheng and Gu Longsheng, he would definitely agree with their judgment. His character, his cultivation was indeed too poor. The training time was too short, leaving him no time to temper his state of mind. This is why the Eternal Emperor suggested that he take the path of invincibility before, and some people wanted to use the Heavenly Lord Saint to break through it because of his invincible momentum. What he can reach today is because of his invincible courage to move forward and push everything. It's not that he wants to be like this. This is the reason why Yang Hao can maintain himself and make crazy progress in his current practice. Motivation. If once his invincible spirit is broken, his fragile mind due to his short cultivation time over the years will be exposed. This will cause a terrible blow to him. Being able to pass this calamity does not mean that he truly has the ability to treat all peace of mind. But he believes in himself. Let himself not lose himself in absolute self-confidence. Others can realize and sublime, so naturally he can too. No one in the world can match his understanding. If you can't realize it today, it's because his method is banned. Therefore, when others are making breakthroughs and sublimations, Yang Hao is still listening to the sermons of Emperor Tiandu with great concentration. He even puts Emperor Tiandu's words attentively. The extremely profound sermon was memorized word for word. This is why after the Emperor of Heaven and Earth preached, he was able to step forward and explain it again. After walking out this time, Emperor Tiandu's sermons will make my cultivation level greatly improve again. After explaining to Yunyan, Yang Hao still remembered Emperor Tiandu's sermons just now very clearly in his mind. These sermons were not illusions, but the real words left by Emperor Tiandu. If you are agitated, he couldn't listen at all. But because of his invincibility, he forced himself to calm down, and gained a lot. The knowledge of this Emperor of Tiandu was so profound that he even really dabbled in the laws of fate. Now Yang Hao's mind was full of sudden realizations, which made him very regretful. This feeling is very wonderful. You should enter the state of practice immediately. Unfortunately, there is still a ninth calamity. Although Yang Hao felt regretful in his heart, he could not choose to leave just because he had reached the eighth calamity in a row just because of his enlightenment. At this moment, everything in front of him changed again. A familiar figure appeared in front of him. The Eternal Emperor. Yang Hao was not surprised when he saw the figure of the Yongsheng Emperor appearing in front of him. All four emperors had already appeared during the 9 tribulations of heaven and man. It was only reasonable for the Yongsheng Emperor to appear. According to common sense, this 9th calamity should be the decline of Taoism. But I don't feel that my avenue is failing. So what will be tested in this 9th calamity? Seeing the Eternal Emperor slowly approaching him, Yang Hao was also guessing. You are very good. Over the years, you are the second fastest in breaking through the 9 tribulations of heaven and earth. Emperor Yongsheng stepped forward, as if he didn't know Yang Hao, and said to him calmly. Second. When Yang Hao heard this, he frowned and said, who is the first? He cultivates an invincible aura, naturally strives to be the first in everything, and has a strong competitive spirit. He has broken through 8 tribulations in a row. In addition to spending a lot of time listening to the sermons of Emperor Tiandu in the 8th tribulation, Yang Hao's speed in breaking through the other 7 tribulations is very impressive. It was extremely fast, but I didn't expect that it was only the second of the 9 calamities of heaven and man. Reincarnation. The Eternal Emperor in this 9th calamity did not cover up, but said directly to Yang Hao. Okay, enough gossip. The 9th calamity is very simple. This is Jingshenmen. The door of life, the door of death, the 2 doors. You walk into the gate of life, and you will return after spending 100 million years. After returning, you will only spend 1 second here, and you will also erase the memory of 100 million years in the gate of life. There is nothing in the world inside the door, no aura, no laws, no living beings, and no chance whatsoever. Not only that, you can't use any of your treasures in the world inside the door, not even the Ji-Dao Emperor weapon. Naturally, neither your sea of spiritual energy, Dao patterns, laws, or techniques can be used. In the world inside the door, you are just the most ordinary mortal. But you can't die, you can't even commit suicide. If you have not collapsed in the life gate, you can directly survive the 9th calamity. If you collapse in the gate of life, the 9th calamity will be considered a failure. Of course, whether you have survived or not, you will not inherit the memory of this. When Yang Hao heard this, he narrowed his eyes. He looked at the hands of the Eternal Emperor, and a mini blood-red door appeared. He recognized this blood-red door as the Jingshen gate he entered when he entered. This extremely powerful thing, the Imperial Soldier, seems to be extremely special. It has been in it for 100 million years, but it is only in the outside world for 1 second. If I erase my memory, will it have any impact on my mind and body? Yang Hao suddenly asked. Won't. In the eyes of this emperor, you just enter and then walk out. In your eyes, it's also about entering and then exiting. The results will appear. The Eternal Emperor said indifferently. What about the 100 million years of memory in between? Collapsed and dissipated naturally. Without collapsing, it turned into the energy of Jingshen section. The Eternal Emperor said bluntly. Why collapse? How to define? Yang Hao's face was slightly ugly, and he asked again and again. The walking dead will collapse if they no longer have any sense of autonomy. The Yongsheng Emperor still knows everything and talks endlessly. Yang Hao is speechless. This is the 9th calamity for all Shenmen. Death's door, so what? Yang Hao's pupils shrank sharply. Jingshenmen's extremely powerful imperial weapon revealed an evil section. It actually uses the memory of devouring people as energy. The door of death is also very simple. Walking in, walking out, the same time. but you'll spend 1,000 years in it. For this 1,000 years, you will keep it forever. The world inside the gate is exactly the same as that in the living gate. Naturally, you cannot use any abilities or commit suicide. Within 1,000 years, if you collapse, it will be like death. Not even I can save you. There is no way to turn back, no way to start over, which is naturally the door to death. Hearing the answer of the Eternal Emperor, Yang Hao looked slightly embarrassed. 1,000 years is not difficult for a practitioner. But, staying in a world of death and silence for 1,000 years, you can't even use any treasures or abilities. Don't say anything about him, even a sage will collapse. He finally understands why 100 million years is the gate of life and 1,000 years is the gate of death. The gate of life can turn back. Everything he encounters in the gate of life will be shocked. The divine gate is completely swallowed up and forgotten. It does not affect him at all. If he is lucky, he can even successfully survive the 9th calamity. But the death gate is completely different. Once it collapses in it, it will completely turn into a walking zombie. If you don't want to choose, you can also choose to give up. To be honest, you are very unlucky. The tests of the 9 tribulations of heaven and man are different for everyone, and the same is true for this 9th tribulation. The gate of life and death is the most difficult existence among all the 9th tribulations among the 9 tribulations of heaven and man. Giving up, I can understand. After all, no one has ever passed through this door of life and death in all these years. The words of the Eternal Emperor slowly came again, advising Yang Hao to give up. Master, the 2 gates of life and death in this Jingshen sect are too terrifying. They are no longer a way to sharpen one's mind, but a form of punishment to torture the enemy. 8 calamities should be enough. Yunyan also said to Yang Hao at this moment. She was not trying to hinder Yang Hao. On the contrary, Yunyan was a saint who had practiced for many years and had an equally tough mind. Because of this, she knew very well how terrifying the test of the 9th calamity was. From the words of the Eternal Emperor, no one can explain everything. Since some people have failed here, I would like to ask how many people chose the door of life, how many people chose the door of death, and how many people gave up. Yang Hao asked slowly, with a serious expression. 3 people are born, 1 is killed, and 18 people give up. Those from the death gate fell, and the rest returned safely. The Eternal Emperor replied. I choose death's door. When Yang Hao heard this, he chose the door of death without a trace of hesitation. Without it, he has never had the habit of giving up. The choice between 100 million years and 1,000 years. It seems that 100 million years is the most promising. But Yang Hao knew that it was impossible for anyone to survive 100 million years of death. Most importantly, he has no habit of leaving his fate to luck. 1,000 years of deathly silence was equally terrifying, but he wanted to try it. Since the great emperors set up the 9 tribulations for heaven and man, they naturally thought that some people could pass it. If there is no possibility of passing, why bother to commit this calamity? Please. When the Eternal Emperor heard the words, he nodded slightly and threw his hand. The blood-red door instantly enlarged and appeared in front of Yang Hao. Yang Hao walked in without any hesitation. Please download the novel without underlining. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I took away the villain's son. Author, the Great Onmyoji. Chapter 198. Yang Hao stepped into the Jingshen gate and then appeared in a deserted wilderness. Looking up, you can see the distant stars. Looking down and looking around, except for the wilderness, there was not even a sound of wind in the air. The deathly silence made Yang Hao subconsciously feel a chill in his heart. He found that his divine body was as before, annihilated and unable to sense. At the same time, no matter whether it is the law crystallization in the body, the prehistoric killing array or the Five Elements Avenue, it can't be seen. Yes, if you close your eyes, you cannot see the bright and flowing sea of spiritual energy that you are familiar with. There is just endless darkness. Just like a mortal. A strange yet familiar feeling. Yang Hao took a deep breath, as if he had gone back to a long, long time ago. At that time, he had not yet come to this world full of spiritual practice. There were so many memories that came to his mind. Yunyin. Yang Hao put away his memories and subconsciously called Yunyin. But Yang Hao found that his call was like falling into an abyss, and there was no echo. Yunyin has been transformed by me, there is no way she will not respond to me. It seems that this space is indeed isolated from everything, as the Eternal Emperor said. Yang Hao knew very well that everything in his body, including the special imperial weapon Wei Tower, was completely isolated. What about the system? Yang Hao looked at the system's income record again. Compared to the Jidao Emperor soldier, the system is aloof. If the system can continue to get points during this 1,000 years, it will be a big gain. But Yang Hao was disappointed. Earned 100 million points for inner shock. Earned 100 million points for making a choice. Earned 150 million points for entering the shocking gate. At this moment, the system's continuously rolling income record stopped abruptly after he entered the Jingshen section. No more scrolling. The Eternal Emperor said. Although I've been there for 1,000 years, only 1 second has passed in real time. Although the system will continuously obtain points. But it should be obtained according to the passage of time, and corresponding points should be obtained according to the realm. Yang Hao immediately understood. There is always a time interval between the frequency of the system getting points. His real time has only passed for 1 second, so the system will naturally pause in the middle. This pause, for him, is thousands of years. From the perspective of the system's judgment, it is higher than Jingshen sect, and a second has passed. This matter was also within Yang Hao's expectation. If time is counted in Jingshen sect, then doesn't it mean that Jingshenman can affect the system and is more powerful than the system? Let's start digesting the previous sermon of Emperor Tiandu. Yang Hao also knows that in the face of death, only by giving yourself something to do can you quickly forget time and get rid of suffering. Fortunately, this special and incomparable world of death has deprived him of everything, but his memory cannot be taken away. Tiandu, the content of the emperor's previous sermon was enough for him to comprehend for a long time. He began to cross his legs, and his mind kept recalling the previous content. There was no divine body, no supreme immortal bone, nothing, making his thoughts slower than before. Times. Fortunately, what Yang Hao lacks most now is time. Compared with difficulties, he is more worried about having nothing to do. Yang Hao didn't know at this moment that in this world, 5 figures quietly appeared in the endless and distant stars, all eyes were focused on him. This little guy is smart and knows how to digest the content of your sermon, a fat man said with a smile. Even so, it is not easy to survive 1,000 years. The white-haired old man, Emperor Tiandu, looked at Yang Hao's figure and nodded slightly. Eternal Senior, why did you deceive him just now at this time? The Samsara Emperor with his eyes closed suddenly asked the Eternal Emperor beside him. Haha, how can there be deception? First, it's him, the great Samsara said in a calm tone. In terms of speed, it is indeed the fastest among the 9 calamities of heaven and man. When the Eternal Emperor heard this, he smiled and said, there are not so many tricks to reincarnate into the 9 tribulations of heaven and man. If we look at it today, this kid would definitely be the best, the Tiandu Emperor retorted to the Yongsheng Emperor. The first in reincarnation is the first. Even if she broke into the 9 tribulations of heaven and humanity many years ago and the 9 tribulations of heaven and humanity have not yet been perfected, she is still the number 1. I told this kid that he was number 2 just because I wanted to see his character. As expected, he is a peerless evildoer who walks the path of invincibility. He would rather walk through the door of life and death than admit defeat at all. Hearing the sigh of the eternal emperor, the bearded man who had never spoken a word said dully, "It seems that you want to induce him to walk through the door of life and death. Do you think so highly of him?" The eternal emperor nodded when he heard this and said, "This son should be the sixth emperor of my holy land. Today, when I enter the door of death, you all should take care of me. Once it reaches the extreme, just save him and achieve the effect of sharpening." Emperor Tiandu was a little hesitant. "I'm afraid this is breaking the rules." "Rule? We are the rules." "Tiandu, could it be that you want this little guy to really die in the Jingshen sect?" the eternal emperor said lightly. "Old guy, I'm really not afraid that this little guy will cause trouble for you in the future. This is a life and death test for a quasi-emperor to hone the 5 degenerations of heaven and human beings. You actually let a little guy in the giant realm test it," the fat Emperor Hunkin said with a groan. He knew very well that the number of people who the Emperor Yongsheng told Yang Hao just now was indeed correct. But the Emperor Yongsheng did not tell Yang Hao that those 22 people were all quasi-emperors. He. I'm doing this for his own good. The law of fate is not so easy to control. If his character does not enter the first realm, which is clear and untainted, even if he cultivates the divine will of destiny, he will be assimilated into the world of Destiny Avenue. The Eternal Emperor said lightly, with a casual tone, but he was clearly one with the soul in the Emperor's tomb. When the other emperors heard the Eternal Emperor mention the law of destiny, they nodded subconsciously and said no more. Just like that, in this dead world in the middle, Yang Hao successfully passed the first 100 years relying on the sermons of Emperor Tiandu. Although the first 100 years were boring, Yang Hao still gained from time to time. The second 100 years were also very interesting. Go quickly. At this time, Yang Hao has thoroughly studied and analyzed the content of Emperor Tiandu's sermon countless times. He has used the ultimate deduction of mortal wisdom. Unless everything can be restored, there will be no sense of enlightenment. 100 years have arrived. Interesting. Start trying to practice spiritual practice? It's useless. This is the lifeless world of Jingshen sect, where all elements of cultivation have been completely stripped away. In the dead world, Emperor Hunkin looked at Yang Hao and waited for Yang Hao's next performance with a smile. Sure enough. After trying for 30 years, Yang Hao finally found with despair that it was impossible to practice in this world. At this moment he was already a little restless in his heart. The more than 300 years of dead silence were terrifying. This was not a practice that would pass in the blink of an eye. It was a real struggle and suffering every minute and every second. He worked hard. He calmed down his state of mind and began to recall his spiritual practice in this life. Yang Hao began to summarize and review himself. It seemed that he had opened the door to a new world. Time began to pass again. The 450th year. On this day, Emperor Tiandu looked at Yang Hao in the dead world. At this time, Yang Hao could no longer recall everything about himself. Because of his cultivation, every detail and every fragment of memory was forgotten by him. Countless times of sorting and summarizing. He knew the gains and losses, knew the advance and retreat, and understood many truths that he had never understood before. However, there was still only deathly silence. Yang Hao also screamed in despair, and closed his eyes in despair. These are all normal. Performance. But time still flows slowly and endlessly. This time, he began to recall all the experiences he had before coming to this world. For him, it had no effect. He was just bored and wanted to find something to do. 570 years, I can't stand it anymore. Do you want to take action? The Emperor of Samsara appeared. Although he closed his eyes, he still seemed to be able to sense Yang Hao in the dead world. He had not moved for a long time, and his body was covered with dust and grass. His thoughts would only fluctuate for a long, long time. They were just unconscious thoughts. In his heart, silhouettes of figures would flash from time to time, and finally turn into one. This is the most essential figure in Yang Hao's heart, the figure he wants to see most at this moment. Yang Hao seems to be on the verge of collapse. Wait a minute. I should be able to hold on a little longer. I'm optimistic about him. The Eternal Emperor also appeared next to the Samsara Emperor again, looking at Yang Hao, who was like floating dust with sharp eyes. At this moment, in the past 570 years, there has been no movement from the outside world for even a second. Time is turning around. At that time when Yang Hao and Emperor Yongsheng choose whether to enter the gate of life and death. Zhongzhou, the holy land of Taiyan. There is a pagoda in the holy land of Taiyan, which reaches the sky and the earth, with no end in sight. It is one of the holy lands of Taiyan, with endless great opportunities. At this time suddenly, I heard a fairy sound coming. A vision of heaven and earth suddenly came from the pagoda that had been silent for a long time. The shadow of a golden phoenix appeared. This golden phoenix soared in the sky, and the world was boiling. In an instant, the stars of the avenue were stirred, and there was a star of the Tiangang Avenue. Star rising. Huh! Is Emperor Zun's main star of the avenue about to be extinguished? Illusion? The main star of Emperor Zun's avenue is as clear as the sun, shining with endless divine light. Strange. Daodaozeng appeared in the world because of the birth of a genius. Some people found that the main star of the avenue seemed to dim in an instant and was about to die. I never thought that the next moment it would be as bright as the sun, even brighter than before. I took away the villain's son. Author, the great Onmyoji. Chapter 199. The Avenue Galaxy appears. There are three main stars of the Avenue. Naturally, the one belonging to the Ziwei star can only be Yang Hao. Is this the main star of Avenue? I heard that he has never had a Taoist partner. I wonder if I can. Today, I, Su Lingqing, follow the rules and become the Great Road. Become a saint of the Taiyan Holy Land. In order to find a marriage with the main star of the avenue, I will personally visit the Holy Land of Eternal Life on a certain day, and I invite the world to witness it. Zhongzhou, the Holy Land of Taiyan. A golden phoenix cried out and flew out of the pagoda. A saintly girl of Taiyan who had been silent for who knows how many years actually walked out of the pagoda and received a great opportunity to become a saint on the spot. She looked at the radiant and brilliant Dao Galaxy in the Dao Galaxy, and endless ripples washed away in her heart. In the past, the Taiyan goddess worshipped the heroic figure of the strong. At the moment when the Dao Galaxy was attracted, she openly declared that she wanted to fight with the Dao Galaxy. The main star forged a marriage. This Taiyan goddess climbed the pagoda, which took a whole 1,000 years to climb. She never thought that she would be so bold and passionately show her love to the emperor just after she was born. Yes, it's really surprising. However, Emperor Zun also has no Taoist partners. Women chase men, and there is a veil between them. Back then, the Taiyan goddess once dominated the world with her beauty. It is very likely that Emperor Zun will prostrate himself under the pomegranate skirt of the Taiyan goddess. I don't think so. Emperor Zun can become the main star of the Dao. Some time ago, he easily suppressed the Tianjun saint who has been unparalleled in the past few years. With his Taoist heart, I am afraid that Emperor Zun loves practicing more than Taoists. For a time, the whole world was in an uproar, and countless people were talking about it. Most people looked at Su Lingqing's lofty Dao Tiangang star and the equally brilliant Dao main star, and felt that they were inexplicably a perfect match. At this moment, the Eternal Holy Land was also in shock. It's not because of the words of the Taiyan saint, but because the Jingshen sect is blooming with 9 colors of divine light. The 9-color divine light, like a rainbow, goes in all directions towards the Holy Land of Eternal Life. This scene attracted countless attention. Because the same nine-color divine light only appeared once more than 10 years ago. All the extremely strong men in the Holy Land of Eternal Life understand the meaning of the nine-color divine light blooming in the Jingshen sect. That time, it was Lord Longshan who passed through the 9 tribulations of heaven and man. Now that Jingshen sect is once again blooming with 9 colors of divine light, there is no doubt that someone has broken through the 9 tribulations of heaven and man. Who is breaking through the 9 tribulations of heaven and man? How many years have you been there? An ancient sage from the Holy Land who had just revived asked. It's Emperor Zun. He has only entered Jingshenmen for less than a month. How can this be? How could he pass through the 9 tribulations of heaven and man so quickly? It took Lord Longshan 10 years to escape from the 9 tribulations of heaven and man. How did the emperor manage to overcome the 9 tribulations of heaven and man so quickly? A series of shocked voices sounded. Many people know that Yang Hao has gone through the 9 tribulations of heaven and humanity. Although I don't understand why Yang Hao, who is the Holy Lord of Tianding, would go through the 9 tribulations of heaven and man, many people are actually not optimistic about Yang Hao. Without it, everyone knows that the 9 tribulations between heaven and man are relatively more gifted, and are more of a test of one's mind. Based on Yang Hao's training time, even Qin Sheng, an ancient dragon saint, who were on Yang Hao's side, only believed that Yang Hao could survive 6 or 7 calamities at most. Moreover, I'm afraid it will take a lot of time. But who would have thought that in less than a month, all 9 calamities of heaven and man would be eliminated by Yang Hao? This little guy did it again. Zhongwu's beautiful eyes flickered at this time, her eyes locked on the Jingshen gate, waiting for Yang Hao to walk out. Her heart was full of pride. Although she knew how to do it, there is no doubt that Yang Hao once again created a miracle with just a few seconds. It was incredible to break through Tian Renjiu in less than a month. However, Zhongwu was about to lose it. Yang Hao was not able to walk out immediately. He had just walked out of the Jingshen gate at this time, but was caught by 5. The great emperors were surrounded. Except for the reincarnation emperor who closed his eyes, the other 4 great emperors all showed their eyes with a look of wonder. Even compared to the shocked extreme powerhouses in the outside world, these 5 were the incarnation of the emperor in the Jingshen sect was even more shocking and inexplicable. Only they knew what happened before. In a short second in the outside world, in the dead world, Yang Hao came back to life. 600 years later, the original Eternal Emperor was ready to take action, rescued Yang Hao. But he never thought that Yang Hao, who was already as rickety as an ant, suddenly sat upright, with a smile on his face and a solemn look. From the moment he sat upright, Yang Hao seemed to have, endless holy light surged, driving away the endless silence. Just like this, he sat calmly and peacefully, spending the remaining 300 years. If the onlookers had low cultivation, they might not be able to see anything. But all the time those who paid attention to Yang Hao were the incarnations of 5 great emperors. These 5 great emperors naturally saw at a glance that Yang Hao was on the verge of collapse, his character had transformed, and he had made a breakthrough. In the end, he was able to easily survive the last 300 years. Little guy, there are high and low levels of mind. You can be considered a beginner now, and I will tell you. The first state of mind is pure and untainted, and all things retreat. The second state of the mind is to be the immovable king of mind, where flowers can grow freely. Are you now pure or unmoved? The plump Emperor Hunkin asked curiously to Yang Hao with a smile on his face. As his words fell, magical waves reverberated into Yang Hao's body. This is what Emperor Hunkin will say about the realm of mind. Notify Yang Hao of information. In such a state, one should directly cross the first state of mind and enter the state of Fudo Ming Wang. Such terrible luck. No wonder he wants to get his hands on the laws of destiny. The Emperor Tiandu looked at Yang Hao with shining eyes. Retreat first, he is in a state of enlightenment now and will not pay attention to us at this time, the Emperor of Samsara suddenly said. He could see at a glance that Yang Hao, who had been teleported out of the Jingshan's death gate, was still smiling at this moment, but he ignored them. All Yang Hao's cultivation at this moment was completely returned. His divine body, Dao patterns, immortal bones, law crystals, all slowly returned. Not only that, Yang Hao's aura was slowly becoming huge. The crystallization of his law of destruction began to turn into a divine will. The taciturn Emperor Tian suddenly said. Not only the law of destruction, but other laws are also transforming. The reincarnation Emperor's eyes that had been closed slowly opened a little, and he looked at Yang Hao, and terrifying avenue auras flowed out. He should have entered the second state of his mind, otherwise there would not have been such an exaggerated transformation. His ninth law has not yet crystallized, but the other 8 laws have begun to turn into divine wheels. Could this kid want to defy heaven? Emperor Hunkin smacked his lips, stared and murmured. The most powerful giant throughout the ages, the forging emperor spoke again. What he said is absolutely right. In the giant realm, you only need to understand the laws and condense them into law crystals. The 9 laws can condense the immortal matter and sublime it into an eternal giant. But don't say that the eternal giant, even if it is the emperor, may not necessarily be able to condense all the 9 laws in his body into a divine will. Yang Hao now has 8 full laws in his body, all of which have been turned into divine wheels. In addition, Yang Hao also controls a 5-element avenue, which is called the strongest in history. Giant, there really is no problem at all. More than that, his attainments in the law of time are astonishing, and the divine will of time is turning into a divine gate, the eternal emperor said lightly, but his calm tone could not hide his shock. The 5 emperors were silent at this moment, looking at each other, as if they were thinking about what level they were when they were as old as Yang Hao. Time passed. In shock. In the divine gate, I don't know how much time has passed. Yang Hao's smile finally began to shrink and return to its original state. But earth-shaking changes have taken place in his body. As the Emperor of Samsara and the Emperor of Eternal Life said, in addition to the still vacant third outside the 9 principles and the 5 elements avenue that has been transformed into a great avenue, the divine will of time turned into the divine gate of time. The crystals of other special laws, including the space crystals that had not been condensed for a long time, all turned into the appearance of the divine will. His combat power surged again. Thank you, great emperors, for your protection. This time, I got some opportunities and was lucky enough to enter the second state of mind. King Fudo, I am free to grow flowers. Yang Hao looked around and looked at the 5 incarnations of the emperors around him. Emperor Hunkin had told him about the state of mind before, so he naturally understood. He said slowly with a smile, and his tone was extremely confident. However, at this time, he gave the 5 emperors his senses are very different from before. Although his tone is as confident and proud as ever, it is not as domineering and arrogant as before. Instead, it makes people feel like a spring breeze, elegant and easygoing. It is as if Yang Hao clearly said what he said. I am the best in the world is such a disgusting statement, but when it comes from his mouth, it is a matter of course, making people identify with it, and it is extremely convincing. How did your character change at the gate of death? Finally, when you come back to your senses, please tell me quickly and listen. This is really an eye-opener and makes people feel itchy. The incarnations of the great emperors are naturally not ordinary people. They ignored Yang Hao's thanks and instead urged him to explain how he suddenly transformed on the edge of collapse. I took away the villain's son. Author, the great Onmyoji. Chapter 200. Hearing this, Yang Hao looked at the 4 emperors with a faint smile. He gave birth to memories. 1,000 years of endless time after entering Jingshen sect flashed through his mind like a fleeting glimpse of flowers. Now that I have cultivated myself, looking back, I feel particularly relaxed. But only after experiencing it yourself will you know what kind of suffering and torture it is to spend 1,000 years in a dead world where nothing exists. Little guy, what's going on? How did you achieve enlightenment and enter the second level of state of mind? Yes, I have never seen such a miracle before. Listening to the alternating voices of Emperor Tiandu and Emperor Hunkin, Yang Hao, with a smile on his lips, said unhurriedly, Emperors, I don't know about this either. I was on the verge of collapse. My whole life is like a cloud of smoke flickering by, and I thought I was going to perish completely. But suddenly I had an epiphany, as if there was a flower blooming in my heart, and I could completely look down on everything. He said softly, with an extremely clear and unique temperament, and a strange persuasiveness that made people believe his words unconsciously. Yeah? It seems that you are really born with great luck. Even if everything about you is temporarily blocked by Jingshen sect, you can still achieve enlightenment. For millions of years, your understanding has been among the top 3. Emperor Hunkin said with emotion when he heard the words. What Yang Hao said was actually not beyond the imagination of several great emperors. After all, the state of mind is mysterious, which is a very personal matter. Although it can be tempered, the state of mind is established from the cultivation system. So far, there has always been only the true method of cultivation. Sometimes it is just enlightenment, and there is nothing strange about it. Just the top 3. I think this little guy has a chance to become the strongest emperor, Forging Sky suddenly said. It's hard to say. Enlightenment is the time when understanding is most tested. The Emperor Tiandu also laughed and said. Understanding is only secondary, but with this kind of mind, it will be much easier for this kid in the future when the gods and humans are in decline, Emperor Hunkin praised with a smile. When Yang Hao heard this, he smiled and said nothing. If it were before, he would definitely be competitive and want to ask who the top 3 are. But now, there is no need. No matter how turbulent the outside world is. He stood still, and since he believed he was invincible, he was naturally invincible. He did not tell the truth to these great emperors. In the dead world inside the Jingshen sect, everything was deprived of him. No matter whether it was immortal bones, neither the imperial weapons nor various divine objects can work. No matter how lucky you are, a miracle can't really happen suddenly. System. Yang Hao sensed the system panel in his heart. Yes. Yang Hao's sudden transformation was not because he had an epiphany. At that time, he had reached the edge of collapse, and even his thinking had completely stopped, only fluctuating from time to time. How could he have an epiphany? I used to think that the functions of the system would appear as my level improved. In fact, after I reach a certain standard, the system will open new functions. This is also the reason why I haven't turned on new functions since I turned on automatic enlightenment in the Great Power realm. Yang Hao sensed the new functions appearing on the system panel. The 2 bright characters' state of mind were gilded and resplendent. He once again revised his understanding of the system. In the dead world, his character has been tempered and constantly transformed. The emergence of new functions of the system should be due to his presence in the system. In the dead world of Jingshenmen, the state of mind has been sharpened to the point where the system can activate the corresponding new function. Therefore, the new function on the panel came into being. After Yang Hao looked at this function, there was still a bright plus point mark. It's just that the almost endless astronomical numbers made it impossible for Yang Hao, whose points were almost empty, to add any more points. Too exaggerated. Yang Hao sighed inwardly. Previously, as the 8 principles condensed in his body, he had already stopped. As a result, his point accumulation actually reached an extremely exaggerated level. Previously, there were more than 3 trillion points. However, with the emergence of new functions, just adding 2 points in succession to jump directly to the second realm of Xingxing was empty. Now Yang Hao already knows the details of these Xingxing realms from the information transmitted by Emperor Hunkin. Content. The first state of the mind is clear and pure, and all things retreat, which means that the heart is like glass, spotless, and all things are naturally like dust, and everything retreats. Generally speaking, if you want to reach the first state of the mind, it is absolutely impossible without the realm of sages. Realized it? But Yang Hao directly crossed over the first state of mind and entered the second state of mind, the immovable king. The heart is like a flower growing freely. Let alone a sage. Even many quasi-emperors have not possessed it. When he reaches this state, he is immovable, all dharmas are immovable, his mind is at peace, and his appearance of ease even causes all things to bloom, infecting and affecting other people. It is precisely because he has reached this state that Yang Hao can easily survive the rest of the lifeless world. Hundreds of years. This is why Emperor Hunkin praised that in the future it will be much easier for the five gods and humans to decline. Of course, the points are very easy to get, and Yang Hao will naturally not feel distressed compared to what he got. It is precisely because of the points added by the system that it allowed him to survive the desperate situation, and at the moment he walked out, all the insights he had accumulated over 1,000 years were completely gathered, causing him to fall into an epiphany and undergo a qualitative transformation. If Yang Hao had not yet condensed the crystallization of the ninth law, Yang Hao would have walked out of the door of death this time. Hao even felt that he could directly break through and become an emperor. After passing the 9 tribulations of heaven and man, and reaching the second stage of tempering one's character, he is once again the Holy Lord of Destiny, and it is no longer appropriate to call him a boy. But at this time, Yang Hao suddenly heard the Samsara Emperor saying coldly. The other emperors were stunned, and then subconsciously nodded in agreement. They all looked at Yang Hao seriously, making Yang Hao blink, not knowing why did these emperors become a little serious. Be friendly. The Yongsheng Emperor was the first to speak, and said gently to Yang Hao. Then, he gave Yang Hao a serious courtesy. Even if he is not the real emperor, he is the incarnation of the emperor. At this moment, he actually said this to Yang Hao, a cultivator in the giant realm. Calling Taoist friends is clearly a way of discussing friendship among peers. Be friendly. Without waiting for Yang Hao to respond, the Samsara Emperor also spoke calmly, saluted like the Samsara Emperor, and said solemnly to Yang Hao. Tao friendly. After Emperor Samsara, Emperors Wantian, Emperor Hunkin, and Emperor Tiandu also gave Yang Hao a ritual and said seriously. Yang Hao took a deep breath. He instantly understood the meaning of these ancestors of the eternal Holy Land. From today on, he is qualified to discuss friendship with these great emperors. They act so solemnly to express their attitude. I have met all fellow Taoists. Yang Hao, although he was slightly shaken in his heart, actually performed the Taoist ceremony like all the great emperors in the next moment. His reaction made the 5 incarnations of the great emperors laugh interestingly. If ordinary geniuses were praised like this by them, they would probably be so frightened that they would tremble with fear and panic. Because they couldn't bear it. They couldn't bear the emperor's words of fellow friend and salute. But Yang Hao didn't even ask a question or said a word, and returned the gift simply and neatly. It is indeed the second state of mind. His inner aura of invincibility has been achieved. Even if he is only in the realm of giants, he has set his sights on becoming the emperor after he attains enlightenment. No wonder he regards the emperor as his esteem, and becoming the emperor is his heaven. If I had not died, I would have been looking forward to the day when he would attain enlightenment. The emperor of Tiandu looked at Yang Hao with gleaming eyes, his admiration was beyond words. There is no need to be polite. Now that you have overcome the 9 tribulations of heaven and man, and have good luck, you can borrow the ultimate emperor's arms. That emperor mountain is the ultimate defensive imperial weapon. You can just borrow it when you go to the underworld. At this time, the Yongsheng Emperor slowly spoke to Yang Hao. After hearing this, Yang Hao was silent for a moment, then looked at the Yongsheng Emperor with strange eyes and said, "You are indeed the remnant of the mausoleum. He had felt that the Yongsheng emperor in Jingshen sect was a little familiar before. Hearing what he said now, he naturally understood. Haha. It's just a side detail, don't worry about it. Since we are the emperors of the Holy Land, we naturally need to have an incarnation to sit in the Holy Land. It is not surprising. The Emperor Hunkin on the side laughed and said. Yang Hao nodded slightly and understood. Dishan left the ultimate imperial weapon for this emperor. This is the usage of Dishan. You can understand it yourself. The taciturn Emperor Tian suddenly shot out a divine light and disappeared into Yang Hao's body. Thank you, Emperor Forging Heaven. I would like to ask you, great emperors, what is the use of the other 4 Dao imperial weapons? It's rare to meet all the great emperors in the Holy Land of Eternal Life, and Yang Hao also became curious about other Dao emperor soldiers. Among them, apart from Dishan, he knew that it was the great Forging Heaven. He don't know the rest. He. The Jingshen sect is owned by this emperor and is a special imperial weapon. Well, just use it as an instrument of punishment. Besides, Emperor Hunkin immediately said with a smile. The mother sword of all things belongs to this emperor and is also a special imperial weapon. The mother energy of all things nourishes all things in the world and is the sword of vitality. The Emperor Tiandu also said simply. The sea of bitterness is used to cut the path, it consumes a lot of money, so use it with caution, the Emperor of Samsara said calmly. Then does this great desolate sword also belong to you, the great emperor? Yang Hao heard what the other 4 emperors said one by one, and had a general understanding of these 4 Dao emperor weapons, so he looked at the Yongsheng emperor and asked. Before, the Yongsheng emperor had specially reminded him that the great desolate sword was special, but he never thought that it belonged to Yongsheng. Great emperor. Wrong. This sword has nothing to do with this emperor. It has something to do with you. The eternal emperor smiled mysteriously and said to Yang. How? You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I took away the villain's son. Author, the great Onmyoji. Chapter 201. Related to me. Yang Hao was stunned when he heard the words of the Yongsheng emperor. Before, he knew from the Yongsheng emperor that the great desolate sword was probably more extraordinary than the other 4 Dao emperor weapons. I'm afraid such a Dao emperor weapon would not be found in the Yongsheng Holy Land. How can it still be related to him after it has existed for so many years? It does concern you. Emperor Hunkin on the side said with a smile, speaking of which, it's a pity. If there is no accident, there will be an emperor born in my eternal Holy Land before you. It was such a pity that he died without thinking about it. Emperor Hunkin shook his head regretfully. There is another emperor. Emperor Qin. Yang Hao heard the clue at this moment, his eyes narrowed and he said, could it be that this great desolate sword has something to do with my mother? With his wisdom, he understood it with just a little association. An existence that has been destroyed by death is even related to the Dao Emperor's soldiers, and most importantly, it is related to him. The conditions are so accurate that it would be strange if Haoruo couldn't guess it yet. Yes. Originally, one of the 5 Dao Emperor weapons in my Holy Land of Eternal Life was not this great desolate sword. The Eternal Emperor nodded calmly and said later, your mother borrowed the Dao Emperor weapon like you did. It's a pity that the Dao Emperor weapon was broken into pieces. Fortunately, she also found the great desolate sword again, otherwise she would have caused a huge disaster. When Yang Hao heard this, he felt a little incredible. As the Holy Lord of Heaven, it is extremely difficult for him to borrow a Dao imperial weapon. How did his cheap mother borrow a Dao imperial weapon? Not only that. My mother broke a Dao imperial weapon into pieces. How did she do it? Can you actually get back one piece of Dao Emperor weapon? Why did she die? He actually didn't know much about his mother. Even Jongwoo rarely mentioned it, only mentioned it once or twice in a few words. Now that he heard the 5 great emperors talking about his mother, he naturally became curious. Heart. He completely did not expect that among the 5 Dao Emperor weapons used to suppress the foundation of the eternal Holy Land, the great desolate sword would be left by his mother. I also want to know how she broke a Dao imperial weapon into pieces. It's a pity that when she borrowed the Dao Emperor armament to walk on the ancient road in the starry sky, the Dao Emperor armament was completely broken when she returned, the Eternal Emperor said slowly. Yes. When she returned from the ancient road in the starry sky, she brought a little girl and the great wilderness sword with her. This scene seemed like just yesterday. In a blink of an eye, Emperor Qin also died, and the little girl became a sage. Besides, Emperor Tiandu also sighed. His words made Yang Hao's eyes narrow and he said, the little girl my mother brought back. But Jongwoo, how did my mother die? He asked. These emperors unintentionally told a lot of past events. Although we are the incarnation of the great emperor, we are trapped in the Holy Land and we are not omniscient and omnipotent. Emperor Qin fell outside the Ziwei star. We don't know how he fell. As for that little girl, if she is correct, she should be named Jongwoo. I was originally quite optimistic that this little girl could attain enlightenment, but I didn't expect that you would come out of nowhere and I might be able to attain enlightenment before her. Emperor Hunkin has a broad heart and a fat body. He is not as cruel as what Yang Hao encountered in the 9 tribulations of heaven and man. Instead, he has some ancient ways and a warm heart. I see. Jongwoo, was it my mother who brought her back from the starry sky ancient road? Yang Hao squinted his eyes, never expecting that there were such twists and turns. Yang Hao didn't really want to know if Emperor Qin died. After all, he just came here to seize the body and had never seen Emperor Qin. Naturally care more about Jongwoo. Then Jongwoo, isn't my mother's real sister. Yang Hao's heart skipped a beat. If she were a biological sister, Jongwoo would not have been brought back from the ancient starry sky by his cheap mother. Instead, she should have been on the Ziwei star. He never thought that his biggest worry would follow her. The emperor's unintentional act. Well, Emperor Qin has died. If you want to know the details, ask the little girl yourself. The great wilderness sword is extremely powerful and contains endless supernatural power, but it also has a sinister streak. It is best not to use it. If I were waiting for this emperor, I would have suppressed and studied it long ago. Unfortunately, we are just incarnations. Emperor Hunkin said again. Thank you, Emperor, for clarifying the confusion. Yang Hao also knows a lot at this moment. Although he is somewhat interested in the great wilderness sword, at this moment he is more interested in the law of destiny. This trip has been completed and he is very satisfied. Then go ahead. Seeing Yang Hao's appearance and knowing that Yang Hao was pregnant, the Eternal Emperor said to Yang Hao. Good. Yang Hao smiled. The 9 tribulations of heaven and man were very interesting. He would never forget that silent millennium in his life. The next moment, the scene in front of him flashed away. Suddenly, the figures of the 5 great emperors completely disappeared. He was shocked. Walked out of the divine gate. Emperor Zun walked out. It seems that he has really survived the 9 tribulations of heaven and man, and the vision of Jingshenmen is not fake. Yes. The luck of the Holy Land is constantly blessing the emperor. What a terrible blessing of luck. I'm afraid the emperor has already carried a full tenth of the luck of my Holy Land, right? A series of noises reached Yang Hao's ears. Earned 150 million points for obtaining the luck of eternal life in the Holy Land. Earned 150 million points for obtaining the luck of eternal life in the Holy Land. At the same time, system revenue records are also flooding the screen like crazy. Yang Hao could clearly sense that there were streams of pure energy coming from all directions at this moment, converging into his body. Good luck. Endless years of luck from the Holy Land of eternal life. What a terrifying blessing of luck. I can completely ignore all the prohibitions in the entire Holy Land. Even those imposed by the great emperor can be ignored. No wonder I can borrow the Jideo emperor's soldiers. It's very strange how my cheap mother borrowed the Jideo imperial armament back then. I have never heard that my aunt's previous holy master was my mother. Yang Hao felt the fresh air entering his body, his eyes flickered, and thoughts came to his mind. At this time, however, a beautiful silhouette appeared in front of Yang Hao. The silhouette was none other than Zhongwu, stunningly beautiful. Just standing there, she was the goddess of the nine heavens falling into the mortal world. At this time, Zhongwu looked at Yang Hao, surprise flashed in her beautiful eyes. A strange color. She knew Yang Hao very well, and she could tell at a glance that Yang Hao's whole person had undergone earth-shaking changes in just 1 month after entering the Jingshen sect. Although he was still in the giant realm, Zhongwu could sense Yang Hao's original unruly and arrogant temperament was gone, replaced by a calm and indifferent temperament that shocked the soul. Even someone as strong as Zhongwu, standing in front of Yang Hao, was subconsciously attracted by him. It seems that Hao's centrality has been sharpened during the 9 tribulations of heaven and man. Could it be that he has reached the first state of mind, the state of purity and purity? Zhongwu was guessing, but the next moment something happened that she didn't expect at all. Not only Zhongwu, but everyone had never thought of it. When Yang Hao walked out and saw Zhongwu, he paused suddenly, and then he unexpectedly chuckled and took a step forward. In full view of everyone, he boldly embraced Zhongwu into his arms. The fragrant wind blew over his face, refreshing his heart and soul. "Auntie, see you again. Very nice." He hugged Zhongwu's delicate and boneless body and transmitted a message to Zhongwu. Zhongwu was suddenly hugged by Yang Hao, with countless thoughts in her heart, and was about to break away from Yang Hao's arms. After hearing Yang Hao's words, she was stopped. "Once you get through it, you'll be fine." Zhongwu understood instantly and knew what must have happened to Yang Hao during the 9 tribulations of heaven and man to do such a bold act. She did not choose to push Yang Hao away, but instead hugged Yang Hao lovingly. At this time, the whole place was completely silent. Everyone took a deep breath subconsciously. What's happening here? Emperor Zun actually hugged the great sage. Whether it is now that Zhongwu has stepped down from the position of Holy Master, or when she was serving as Holy Master, she has displayed endless domineering power, and most powerful people in the extreme realm would have to retreat 3 feet away from her. Don't talk about hugging, even getting within 3 feet of Zhongwu made me tremble with fear, fearing to offend a goddess who was as tall as an iceberg. But now, Emperor Zun has made such a bold move. The most important thing is that Zhongwu did not refuse. This has caused many people to have various thoughts. All right. As if feeling the strange gazes of everyone, Zhongwu suddenly reacted. That pretty face as white as jade, which was the first time Yang Hao saw it, started to turn red at an alarming speed. Yang Hao had never seen Zhongwu so delicate and pretty. Before he could react, Zhongwu's figure had disappeared. Somewhat impulsive. When Yang Hao saw this scene, he couldn't help but laugh. But his mood at the moment was extremely beautiful. Zhongwu did not resist him, which was good. He did not choose to chase Zhongwu. Instead, he headed towards the Emperor Mountain. Go. The fate of the endless Holy Land has already lingered around him. He needs to collect the Emperor Mountain first, and then go to find Zhongwu and head to the Eternal Forbidden Zone together. Please download the novel without underlining. I took away the villain's son. Author, the great Onmyoji. Chapter 202. 7 days later. Outside the Holy Land of Eternal Life, Divine Phoenix's sword, auspicious clouds spread across the sky, and fairies filled the sky. Rays of 7-colored divine light fell on the mountain gate of the Holy Land of Eternal Life. Later, as the figures of fairies gradually appeared, one after another appeared. On an ancient divine chariot riding a divine phoenix, a beautiful female saint with extremely clear eyes stepped out. In the Holy Land of Taiyin, the spiritual saint wants to become a Taoist couple with the Taoist master, but he also hopes that the emperor will make it happen. A clear sound, like a falling mountain spring, tinkling and melodious, resounded throughout the Holy Land of Eternal Life. As this sound fell, the Holy Land of Eternal Life boiled. A spiritual saint? But recently, the goddess in the Taiyin Holy Land in Zhongzhou climbed the pagoda for thousands of years, and once she had an epiphany, she was ranked on the great Dao Tiangang star. These days are really lively. Some people come to challenge Emperor Zun, and others want to become Taoist companions with Emperor Zun. This is also normal. With the dazzling Emperor Zun, it will naturally attract countless beings. I heard that Xiao Qing the former emperor who had annulled her engagement, was reborn yesterday. Maybe she will come to look for emperor. In the Holy Land of Eternal Life, disciples one after another looked up at the huge momentum outside the mountain gate, whispering and discussing continuously. Not only the disciples, but also many powerful people from the Holy Land of Eternal Life also walked out. Please come back. Your Excellency, I am afraid that all your efforts have been wasted. Emperor Zun has no intention of being a Taoist companion. A stunning girl with a hot figure and a charming aura walked out and said coldly, with a bad tone. This practitioner who looks like a stunning girl is none other than Emperor Ning Xian. In the past, she wanted to become Yang Hao's Taoist companion, but however, Yang Hao did not agree in the end. Although Emperor Ning Xian later found a way to have a one-night affair with Yang Hao, she knew that there was no chance for Yang Hao's Taoist companion. Especially when Emperor Ning Xian remembered that Yang Hao had passed through the world 7 days ago. In the 9 tribulations, when everyone was watching, but she didn't shy away from Zhongwu's overwhelming embrace, she had a bad feeling. She never thought that there would be a woman who didn't know where she came from, and she also wanted to. He coveted the position of Emperor Taoist companion. Even if the other party was a saint, Emperor Ningxin still walked out coldly and sarcastically said without hesitation. Whether you are an unintentional Taoist lover or not, you have to see them to know. I once met the main star of Emperor Zun Avenue, fell in love at first sight, and swore an oath to stay forever. If the emperor met the saint, he would definitely be moved by my sincerity. Su Lingqing glanced at Emperor Ning Xian and said calmly. Her clear eyes were staring at the mountain gate of the Holy Land of Eternal Life, waiting for Yang Hao to walk out like a watchstone. Unfortunately, Yang Hao's figure did not appear. Let her faintly disappointed. Do you look down on me? I don't even want to meet him once. Su Lingqing was a little worried. She was not that kind of wild woman. On the contrary, she was extremely conservative. Even when she was the Holy Maiden of Taiyin, she was so pure that she kept people away from her thousands of miles away, leaving many saints of her time behind. Crazy about it? The reason why she is so bold now is not only because she is seeking a 1,000-year opportunity in the pagoda and has seen many things, but also because she has not lied just now. She did look at Yang Hao when she was activating the Avenue of Stars. The main star of Dao Dao fell in love at first sight. Because of this, she did what she did today. The thoughts of the saints in the spiritual heart are already known in the Holy Land of Eternal Life. However, Emperor Zun left the Holy Land 3 days ago and headed towards Zhongzhou. A female saint came with good intentions, and the Holy Land of Eternal Life was not left out in the cold. At this time, the acting Holy Lord, the Great Elder, walked out and said to Su Lingqing. Zhongzhou. Su Lingqing was stunned when she heard this. The Holy Land of Taiyin is in Zhongzhou. She came all the way from Zhongzhou, but Emperor Zun went to Zhongzhou? This made her a little confused. Could it be that the emperor knew about the saint and went to the Taiyin Holy Land? Su Lingqing asked back. I thought it was quite beautiful. Emperor Zun's trip is to the Eternal Forbidden City. When he can get out of it, Just let it happen. At this time, the second elder Zhangju came out and said lazily to Su Lingqing. Eternally forbidden. There are 10 dangerous places there. This saint once heard that Emperor Zun was not as strong as a giant, so he dared to take risks in such dangerous places. It is really admirable. But after all, it's still too dangerous. Let me go and protect him. In this case, I'm sorry. Su Lingqing's eyes swayed, but something moved in her heart. She actually drove the divine phoenix chariot back to Zhongzhou. She decided to go to the eternal forbidden zone to find Yang Hao. I was born with a good skin, but unfortunately my brain was damaged in the pagoda. Emperor Zun is protected by Sister Zhongwu, so he still needs the protection of a mere saint like you. Zhangju couldn't help but curl his lips when he saw Su Lingqing coming and leaving in a hurry. When Su Lingqing came to the Holy Land of Eternal Life to show her love to Yang Hao with great fanfare, a goddess also appeared in Zhongzhou. This goddess, dressed in a fiery red dress, is gorgeous and has an extraordinarily earthly temperament. Master, are you sure that guy has entered the eternal restricted area? The goddess in red asked the dignified and elegant woman in white next to her. The two of them were also sitting on a divine chariot at this time, flying in the void at extremely fast speeds, flying thousands of miles away in the blink of an eye. Kindness. But are you sure you want to go against him? The grudge between you two has been settled, and you have seen Juno's fate. He is the son of destiny of this era. There is no life or death enmity between you and him. On the contrary, there is still old hatred. There is no need to have such a grudge against him. The woman in white spoke indifferently, but she spoke to the goddess in red with concern. If my ring is not taken away by him, then that's it. That ring was left for me by my mother, it is very important to me. Master, I must get the ring back. The goddess in red is biting her silver teeth at this moment, showing an angry look. This goddess in red, without saying anything, it is known that she is Xiao Qing'er. The woman in white next to her is naturally her master Lan Sheng. She finally walked out of the Beifang fire god realm, and at the same time she got a great opportunity, both in terms of background and cultivation. At this time, she had received the news that Yang Hao had entered the eternal forbidden zone to look for opportunities, so she asked her master Saint Zunlin went with her to take back the ring that belonged to her. Xiao Qing'er was extremely worried when she thought that Yunyan was likely to be mistreated after being snatched away by that evil guy Yang Hao. She regarded Yunyan as a close friend and teacher. She feels extremely sad when she thinks of the ancient ring being snatched away by Yang Hao because she was too impulsive. That's all. Crazy. If we meet, don't rush into a fight. The master tried to exchange the divine object with this person for the ancient ring. Now that the emperor has become the king, the giant realm can overwhelm the saint. You are no more than an emperor now. Even if you get the complete inheritance of the Sky-Fire Emperor, you will not be his opponent. Lan Sheng said with emotion. She was already extremely shocked by Xiao Qing'er's fate. From the perspective of her long life, she has never seen anyone with such terrible luck and cultivation speed as Xiao Qing'er. It is even closer to the extreme. If Yang Hao knew about it, he would not be surprised. Only the protagonist who is under the influence of the protagonist's luck can practice as fast as he does. Lan Sheng is very regretful now. If it weren't for that year Yang Hao has seized Xiao Qing'er's luck from Ziwei, so Xiao Qing'er is expected to become a saint now. But even a monster like Xiao Qing'er has been suppressed by Yang Hao, and has become something that his beloved disciple will never be able to overcome. A big mountain. Although Lan Sheng wanted to help Xiao Qing'er eliminate the hidden danger of Yang Hao. But how could it be that easy? Yang Hao was already in a great position. The shocking ambush more than 10 years ago did not make Yang Hao fall. Even she, so what? Therefore, Lan Sheng wanted Xiao Qing'er to give up his hatred for Yang Hao, and decided that it would be enough to help Xiao Qing'er get the ancient ring back. Snort. When Xiao Qing'er heard Lan Sheng's words, She snorted softly, a little dissatisfied with the master for boosting other people's ambitions. I don't know where Junior has been these days. I originally wanted him to meet you, but I didn't expect that this boy had been completely depressed by Emperor Zun and wanted to break off the engagement with you. Lan Sheng shook his head and said helplessly to Xiao Qing. Break off the engagement, break off the engagement. Master, it's not like I can't get married, so there's no need to arrange these things for me. It doesn't matter if Sage Tianjun is defeated this time, it saves me the trouble. As long as Yang Hao is not defeated, I will not consider such issues. Xiao Qing said stubbornly. Lan Shen was a little helpless, sighed and said to Xiao Qing, it's up to you. Remember, you found the emperor during this trip, exchanged it for the ancient ring, and then left. The eternal forbidden zone is very dangerous. I know that you have great luck, but you are not able to ignore such a dangerous place. Here we go, let's go. The divine chariot suddenly paused. The two women looked at the extremely green forest in front of them and instantly entered. Emperor Zun, here, just walk here. Okay, I'm going to check out the front. There is no danger. Emperor, you can come now. At this moment, in this extremely green forest, the Tianjun saint mentioned by Lan Shen was speaking to Yang Hao in an extremely flattering manner. Sometimes he walked forward, sometimes he returned to report to Yang Hao, and he was extremely diligent. Kindness. Yang Hao nodded indifferently and looked at the back of Saint Tianjun with cold eyes. He had entered the eternal forbidden zone a few days ago. In addition to him, there were also 5 other people on this trip: Zhang Wu, Saint Tianjun, Saint Yehua and Saint Anling. People.